There is a hush that falls across the world each night, a silence not of absence, but of beckoning. It is the quiet that exists between thoughts, between heartbeats, between the stars, and within that hush, ancient voices whisper to those still enough to hear. Most do not. Most are too busy chasing echoes to notice the source. But for those who pause, for those who turn their face not toward the noise of the world, but inward, there is a memory waiting like a thread of golden silk hidden in the hem of an old garment. It is this thread, delicate yet unbreakable, that leads back to something long buried, something sacred, something that pulses with light. We are born luminous, you see, not just of flesh and blood, but of something older than bone, older than time. There was a time when humanity knew this intimately, not as a philosophy, not as metaphor, but as truth lived in every breath. There was a way, a ritual not written in dusty tomes or locked behind temple doors, but woven into the simple fabric of daily life, a sacred act that, when performed with intention, tore the veil between the seen and the unseen, reuniting the soul with the source. It was not grand in form, but it was profound in effect. And then, like so many sacred things, it was forgotten. Not erased, never erased, just buried beneath centuries of distraction and distortion. Religions came and went. Empires rose and fell. Doctrines were written, and the world grew louder and more complicated. Yet that ritual, the one that realigns the compass of the soul to the true north of the divine, remained quietly humming beneath it all, like a pulse beneath the earth, waiting for us to remember. You may feel it even now, that subtle yearning that no amount of achievement satisfies, that gentle ache in the chest when you look at the stars, and something inside you stirs not with knowledge, but with recognition. You have known this light before. You were made from it. The truth is not distant. It is not beyond you. It is within you, waiting to be rekindled. And this ritual, this forgotten thread in the great cosmic loom, is the match to that dormant flame. This is not a superstition wrapped in incense smoke, nor is it a New Age illusion disguised in glittering language. This is ancient technology, a communion mechanism as real as gravity and as necessary as breath. And it has nothing to do with belief. You don't need to believe in the sun to be warmed by it. You don't need to believe in the tide to be carried by its pull. Likewise, this ritual works regardless of dogma or creed, because it is written not in books, but in the design of your being. You are not a spectator in the cosmos. You are a participant in the ritual of existence. You were always meant to dance in rhythm with the divine. The light we speak of is not metaphorical. It is not merely symbolic of goodness or virtue. It is the primal force that birthed all things. Some have called it God, others the infinite, the one, the presence, the silence, the fire. It doesn't matter what name you give it. Names are veils, after all. The truth of it is vibrational, not verbal. It is the radiance from which all form arises. And you, yes, you are capable of reconnecting to it instantly. Not in theory, not one day, but now. But how? That is the question that presses like dawn against the horizon of your heart. How does one return to what was never truly left? The answer, curiously enough, is not through seeking, but through remembering. Not through adding, but through releasing. This forgotten ritual does not require you to travel far, or change your life, or climb mountains seeking a guru. It simply asks you to remember what is already there, to step out of the mind's maze and into the cathedral of the present moment. There where time slows and breath deepens, the light is waiting. Consider this: if you had been blindfolded at birth and someone removed the blindfold as an adult, the world would not suddenly appear because it was created in that instant. It was always there. You just couldn't see it. The same is true of this light. The ritual we are about to rediscover is the gentle removal of that blindfold, and the sight that returns to you is not just of the world around you, but of who you truly are within it. This is a homecoming, but not the kind that takes you back to an old house or a childhood street. This is a return to the origin of your being, to the sacred silence before the first word was spoken, to the breath before the lungs were formed. It is a remembering of what the world trained you to forget, that you are not separate from the light you seek. You are its expression, its mirror, its echo. So, let us begin the journey back, not forward, as the world would tell you, but inward, downward, deeper, into the forgotten garden within, where this ritual still waits beside a pool of still water, untouched by time. Let us pull back the curtain, not in haste, but in reverence. Let us walk, step by sacred step, back to the threshold where the divine flame still burns, not because we have earned it, but because it is our birthright. At the heart of this forgotten ritual lies not complexity, but elegance, a sacred simplicity that dissolves illusion, like dew beneath the morning sun. It does not speak in thunderous proclamations or demand grand offerings. Instead, it murmurs gently through the architecture of the soul, reminding you that divinity is not found in temples of stone, but in the stillness behind your ribs, in the pause before a thought, in the silence that surrounds each breath. This ritual is not a doorway to the divine, it is the realization that there was never a door to begin with. The core theme, then, is remembrance, not intellectual recollection, but cellular, soul-deep remembrance, the kind that unfolds, not from thought, but from still presence. You are not learning something new here. You are peeling back the layers that have hidden what was always luminous. The ritual activates not by effort, but by surrender. And in that surrender, in that holy letting go, the light flows in not from some distant star or realm, but from within, rising like a tide. To understand why this ritual has such power, we must acknowledge the illusion it pierces. For the modern world is not short on knowledge, but it starves for wisdom. It drowns in information, but cannot remember its own essence. We have mistaken noise for meaning, speed for progress, appearance for truth. We have crafted a culture that praises the external while dismissing the internal, forgetting that the outer world is but a projection of the inner state. This is the great forgetting. The ritual is the rebalancing. And what exactly does it rebalance? It reconnects the fragmented aspects of being mind, body, and spirit into a harmonic chord. Modern life often rips these apart, assigning them into separate silos. The mind becomes a restless machine of analysis. The body, a vessel to be sculpted or medicated. The spirit, a vague afterthought. But in truth, these are not separate instruments. They are strings of the same harp, and the ritual is what tunes them back into resonance. The light, which we invoke here, is not external. It is not something you travel to reach. It is not behind some cosmic gate that opens only to the worthy. No, this light is the current that sustains your very breath. It is the pulse that animates all things. You could call it source, origin, or the great silence. You could name it God, or nothing at all. But whatever name you choose, the experience of it is universal. Infants feel it. Mystics bathe in it. Animals trust it. Trees sway to it. It is the original rhythm. And to participate in the ritual is to entrain yourself once again to that rhythm. Another vital concept embedded in this ritual is alignment. To be aligned does not mean to be perfect. It means to be true. To stand in the center of your own being without distortion. So much of our suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from the misalignment between our inner truth and outer expression. We bend ourselves to expectations, to fears, to inherited patterns. We become actors in someone else's play. The ritual is the act of stepping off that stage, shedding the costume, standing bare in the light of authenticity. And there is a deeper harmony that arises in this state of alignment. When one reconnects to the light within, it is not only peace that flows, but clarity, vitality, even joy. Not the superficial joy of entertainment or distraction, but the steady joy that comes from congruence, from being as you were designed to be, a living bridge between the seen and unseen. A prism through which divine light refracts into form. But perhaps the most subtle and paradoxical truth of this ritual is this: it does not grant you anything you do not already possess. It unveils, it strips away, it invites you to remember that you are not broken, not lacking, not lost. You are a flame pretending to be a shadow. You are the melody that forgot it was music. The ritual is the pause that allows the music to rise again, not through striving, but through listening. This is not about belief. It is not a matter of faith, but of frequency. You can tune into the divine just as surely as you can tune a radio. The static of the world is loud, yes, but the signal is always broadcasting. The ritual is how you quiet the interference. It is how you become the receiver again. And when you do, something ancient awakens. The forgotten becomes familiar. The sacred becomes simple, and the light that once seemed distant becomes the very air you breathe. Now, we must turn to the deeper stories that hold this truth in symbolic form, the myths and metaphors that have carried this wisdom across time, like embers smoldering beneath centuries of ash. In the beginning, they say, there was light, not merely the illumination that banishes shadows, but a kind of sacred intelligence, a song without sound, a presence without form. It breathed across the waters of the void, and in its vibration, worlds were born. From this light, everything that exists emerged, not as separate creations, but as expressions of the same singular essence. And somewhere within that sacred unfolding, humanity was formed, not to rule, not to conquer, but to remember. There is an old story, perhaps older than language itself, of a luminous being who descended into matter, not as punishment, but as choice. This being, radiant beyond imagining, chose to enter the realm of density, of form, of forgetting. It cloaked itself in layers of sensation, emotion, and memory. And as it descended, it whispered one instruction into its own heart: when the time comes, remember the ritual. But as the being settled into flesh, the memory dimmed. The world was loud, the senses overwhelmed, and the ritual, so simple, so sacred, was lost beneath the noise. the being became human, and the light, once flowing freely through its being, became a flicker in the storm. That being is you. This is the myth of descent and return, of exile and homecoming. It echoes across traditions. In ancient Kemet, the god Osiris is dismembered and scattered, only to be gathered again and reborn. In Sumerian lore, Inanna descends into the underworld stripped of her ornaments and power, only to rise again with deeper wisdom. In the East, the Buddha sits beneath the tree not to gain something new, but to wake from the dream of separation. And in the West, the prodigal son returns not to judgment, but to a feast. These are not just tales of gods and sages. They are maps of your own soul. Each story, a mirror, each symbol, a breadcrumb on the path back to the light. The descent into forgetfulness is not failure. It is the necessary contraction before expansion. The silence before the music swells. The ritual does not bypass this journey. It honors it. It is the sacred act that transforms exile into return. Consider the firefly, a small creature of light invisible during the brightness of day. It is only in darkness that its glow becomes visible. So too is the ritual most potent when the night has grown deep around us. It is not the avoidance of darkness, but the remembering of light within it. The ritual does not remove the dark. It reveals that you are not of it, that even in the shadowed woods of sorrow, the flame still lives in your chest, waiting to be seen. In another tale, an ancient temple was built to house the divine, not a temple of stone, but one of intention. It was said that whoever stood at its center in silence, with breath aligned and heart open, would hear the voice of the source, not as words, but as a knowing. Over time, the temple vanished, buried in dust, lost in legend. But the wise ones knew the temple was never outside. It was the body, the center was the heart, and the ritual was the act of returning to that sacred center again and again in stillness until the voice was heard. This, too, is your story. In dreams, many see a staircase or a spiral, a descent into some place ancient and mysterious. Often, it is there in the lowest chamber that the light reappears. Why is it that we must go down to rise? Because the soul remembers through contrast. Without forgetting, remembrance has no spark. Without night, dawn is meaningless. The ritual honors both. It bows to the descent and blesses the return. Even the seasons speak of it. The tree lets go of its leaves, not in death, but in trust. It knows. The return is written into the pattern. Winter is not the end. It is the sacred pause, the womb of stillness, where life prepares to re-emerge. This forgotten ritual is like winter's breath, quiet, cold, clear. It strips away what is false, so only what is real may remain. Perhaps the most enduring symbol of the ritual is the circle. No beginning, no end, just motion, return, wholeness. In ancient rites, the circle was drawn on the ground before invocation. It was the space between worlds, the portal through which the divine could enter. But what if the circle is not something to draw, but something to become? What if the ritual is the remembrance that you, yourself, are the sacred circle, that within you is the axis where heaven and earth meet? There is a moment in every story, sacred and mundane, when the character stops searching outside and turns inward. That moment is the ritual. It is when the hands stop reaching and the heart begins listening. It is not loud, it is not showy. but it changes everything. It realigns the soul, and once you touch it, once you feel the current of the light move through you again, the world does not become easier, but it becomes illuminated. The struggle remains, but now it has meaning. The path remains steep, but now it is lit from within. The ritual is not a fix. It is a return, not to how things were, but to how you are, beneath the forgetting, beneath the story, beneath even the self. And so, from the ashes of ancient stories, from the songs of the stars, and the dreams of sages, this truth continues to whisper. You are not lost. You are only waiting to remember. The ritual is the key, not to escape, but to awaken. The challenge of living in a world that has forgotten its light is not in the absence of truth, but in its burial. Truth is not missing. It is misfiled, hidden under layers of noise, urgency, distraction. And so, the return to the forgotten ritual is not a dramatic act, but a quiet realignment, like tuning a single string in an orchestra until the whole symphony subtly shifts toward harmony. How then does one bring such a ritual into the contours of daily life? Must we retreat into caves, chant beneath moonlight, cast aside the modern world entirely? No. The sacred does not require abandonment of the mundane, it requires presence within it. The ritual, if it is to mean anything, must walk with you into the grocery store, into your inbox, into the noise of traffic, and the silence of loneliness. Begin here with breath, not as function, but as gateway. The breath is the original prayer, the quiet rhythm that began before you could speak and will continue long after words have faded. To reconnect with the divine light, start by sitting in stillness and breathing, not to control, not to force, but to feel. Inhale, as if drawing light from the stars. Exhale, as if releasing centuries of forgetting. This is not symbolic. This is physiological, emotional, spiritual. The breath is the bridge between the visible and the invisible. And now, the gaze. In a world where eyes are used to scan, to judge, to compare, let your gaze become sacred again. Look truly, look at a leaf, a face, a reflection. Do not rush, do not analyze, simply witness. The light shines through all things when we stop demanding that they be something other than what they are. This too is ritual. Then there is silence. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of stillness. Carve space for it, even in slivers. A moment before you speak. A pause before you answer the phone. A breath before you rise in the morning. In these tiny thresholds, the forgotten ritual comes alive. It is not in the length of the silence, but the quality of your listening. For the divine light does not shout, it sings soft songs between seconds. And in your body, the very temple of this world, the ritual finds its throne. Movement becomes prayer when done with awareness. A stretch in the morning sun. A hand placed over your heart. A slow walk. Not to get anywhere, but to arrive where you are. Your body has not forgotten the light. It has only been waiting for your attention. Bring it into rhythm. Let it remember. The ritual thrives on intention, not grand declarations, but humble attention. Lighting a candle with reverence. Washing your face as if cleansing centuries of false identity. Writing a single word of truth in a notebook no one else will ever read. These are not mere gestures. They are incantations. The divine responds to sincerity more than sophistication. Perhaps most radical of all presence with others. In a world frayed by separation, to look another human in the eyes with full presence is to invoke the ritual in its most luminous form. The divine light is not hidden in the heavens, it flickers in the warmth between beings, a hand held, a truth spoken, a silence shared. In those moments, you become the portal. The light flows through you not as an achievement, but as a return. This is not a practice to master. It is a rhythm to remember. Some days you will feel it clearly like sunlight on your skin. Other days, it may feel lost beneath the noise. But the light does not disappear. It only waits. Like a lighthouse, veiled in fog, it continues to shine. The ritual is how you turn toward it again. And when you do, the world begins to shift, not always externally, but fundamentally. Synchronicities appear, like secret breadcrumbs. Conversations deepen, nature seems to speak more directly. Even difficulty begins to feel like a passage, rather than a punishment. You are not suddenly freed from suffering, but you are no longer owned by it. You suffer, yes, but you suffer with meaning. You walk through pain, but with the light as your lantern. This ritual, then, is not just about transcendence, it is about embodiment. The light does not come to lift you out of the world, it comes to root you deeper in it. With eyes that see, a heart that feels, and a soul that remembers. In every act, no matter how small, the ritual can live. In every moment, the light can shine not as miracle, but as homecoming. For ultimately, the divine light you seek is not a place to reach, but a presence to allow. It does not need to be summoned, it only needs to be seen. And the forgotten ritual, it is the lens through which your soul begins to see again. Clearly, kindly, courageously. There is a moment soft and almost imperceptible when the veil begins to lift. It does not announce itself with fireworks or thunderclaps. It arrives quietly, like dawn filtering through heavy curtains. And in that moment, the world does not change, but you do. The air feels different. Your breath deepens. The familiar now glows with unfamiliar depth. That is the sign not that the light has returned, but that you have. And in truth, it never left. This forgotten ritual, this sacred gesture of remembrance, is not about bringing the divine back into your life. It is about revealing that it never departed. It waited in the wings of every breath, in the spaces between your thoughts, in the silence that surrounds your words. The ritual has always been the bridge, unassuming, invisible, but strong. And now, you have crossed it. Not by force, not by knowledge, but by surrender, by listening. The call now is not just to remember, but to live as one who remembers. The light you have touched is not merely for moments of meditation or solitude. It is not reserved for temples or mountaintops. It is for the washing of dishes, the walking of dogs, the difficult conversations, the quiet tears at midnight, the laughter on the bus. The ritual belongs there, in the heartbeat of daily living, because you are the ritual now. You carry the flame. There is an ancient saying, whispered by mystics across time, as within, so without, as above, so below. The ritual has made this more than a phrase. It has become your inner compass pointing toward wholeness, not as a destination, but as your origin. You are no longer a seeker trying to reach the divine. You are a vessel through which the divine reveals itself to the world. This changes everything, but not by addition, by subtraction. What falls away is the frantic seeking, the need to be enough, the illusion of separation. What remains is luminous, centered, quietly powerful. And now, the path forward becomes clear, not straight, but illuminated. You will walk it, not as one desperate for light, but as one who radiates it. The ritual does not demand perfection. It invites presence. It invites you to return again and again to the still point inside you where the light never wavers. And in doing so, you become a beacon for others. They may not recognize what they feel in your presence. They may not speak of light or rituals or source, but they will feel something ancient awaken in themselves, a stillness, a peace, a remembrance. You become, without trying, a reminder to others that they too are divine. This is the gift and the responsibility of the awakened. Not to fix the world, but to become a living invitation to its healing. Not to speak the truth endlessly, but to embody it quietly. Not to save others, but to remind them that they were never lost. And yes, you will forget again. The fog will roll in. The world will grow loud. But the ritual remains. The light waits. And the return is always possible, always immediate. There is no punishment in forgetting, only grace in remembering. Over and over again, you will rise. And every time you do, the light burns brighter through you. So let this be your vow, not to the world, not to any creed or teacher, but to yourself. I will remember, I will return, I will embody the light that I am. Let your life become the ritual. Let your breath become the prayer. Let your presence become the offering. And may every step you take from this moment forward be made with the quiet, radiant knowing that you walk not toward the divine, but with it, as it, through it. Because the truth is simple and stunning. You were never separate. You were always light. You were only waiting to remember. And now you have.